Welcome back to the conversation, the DMGB conversation. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, that stands for Doesn't Matter, Get Better. Every single day we deal with adversity. Environment does not matter. Circumstances don't matter. All that matters is that you make the decision to get better. So I am very excited to welcome our next guest to the conversation. This is a guy that I have met through the South Florida business community. An opportunity to work together brought us together, and then we quickly became friends, as all good business relationships do. And we've enjoyed a lot of time together and learning his story. So welcome to the conversation, Andy Hill.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here today.
No, I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited for you to share your story and tell everybody where you come from. I'll tease it a little bit, being a Dayton Flyer up in my Ohio times when I was at Cincinnati. So excited to connect with another Ohioan. And so what I do is I allow the guests to kind of give the overview of themselves, the Cliff Notes version of your story. Right now, you're the Chief Revenue Officer for City Furniture down here in South Florida, but that's not where you've always been, and that's not what got you there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, where you started, and what got you to where you are today.
Great question. So I've come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so entrepreneurial blood has been in my veins for quite some time. My first company I actually started when I was in second grade, drawing little flags of different countries and selling them until I got suspended. And so it was just a fun little thing there. And
wait, hold on, stop. You got suspended for selling flags?
Yeah, I got pulled into the principal's office a couple times. Parents laughed at it, and that's when they recognized I needed to go to a different school. So they pulled me out in third grade, and I transferred over schools after that. But yeah, so it was always in my blood, like I always found it fun, found it interesting to uncover a problem. And throughout my life, I've started and sold and failed quite a few startups. The first major one was in college. I created a social media marketing firm called Talk to Me Media that helped small to mid-sized businesses get going on this new thing called social media. And so that was a couple of years back, and we represented small, mid-sized brands all the way up to like Domino's in the entire Ohio area, right? And so that was a fun little adventure for us, and then gave that to my partner as I went on to come down to Florida, actually. So from there, I wanted to test out the corporate side of things. So I started working at Office Depot, where I did financial planning analysis, merchandising analysis, a couple other things like that, and built a couple interesting models that automated my workload pretty quickly, and started down that path and recognized at one point it just wasn't the right stage for me. And so I started getting noticed well in that organization, started doing a couple interesting things. And at one point, my boss didn't want me going anywhere else inside of the organization. So he wrote down a number on a piece of paper, slid it across my desk. And as a 23-year-old time, it was way more than I ever should be considering. So 2 weeks later, I quit. And so I knew that I would be pretty locked in. I knew I would be pretty happy in that position, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to take risks, And I think that's a hard thing to do. And sometimes you take a decision and then you kind of get locked into it, right? And so that was the opposite approach there. So I went out on my own, raised a very, very small seed round for a social goods startup called Stand For, all aimed at helping millennials make their mark on the world through technological innovation. And that really kicked things off. So we had a couple small little projects that started to do well. We had a team of 6 people in my 2-bedroom apartment with 2 dogs. And so it was quite a little handful of everything kind of growing. But then we were able to raise a Series A and build a team of about 22 people. And so we rented a house out in actually Boynton Beach. And it was kind of like the entrepreneurial Silicon Valley scene where we had 7 people living there doing all this other crazy stuff in between. And so that went pretty well up until August 2015, where it was the worst month of my life, where I had to tell 22 of my closest friends and family that I failed them, that the Series B that we were expecting pulled out. And all of a sudden we had a 3-month run rate, and I didn't know where I was going to have my friends and family come down and who moved down here, where they were going to go next. And so we had about 3 months left. So we said, hey, listen, take that time to do 2 things. Number 1, go look for other opportunities to make sure that you're safe and sound. And number 2, we'll go start testing some new waters. So we tested 2 new companies out of that. The first is a technological consulting company that helped others really like retailers who were laggards in the space, technology innovation, who knew they needed to get to that next step and go down that path. It really helped them get there. We built out their e-commerce teams and started going down that path. That wasn't really my baby. That was Manish's here at Barra's. He's still running that today. It's up to like $15 million and really growing. And I'm really proud of all the success he's had through all that. And then the second one was a company called Atlas, which was doing predictive sports analytics. And so with predictive sports analytics, we, as it sounds fancy, but really it's almost like we're betting on games. So we offered a subscription service model that allowed our top bettors in the world, if you will. So like they're betting $50,000 a game kind of thing. And we offered exclusivity to be able to provide, who we think is going to win. And so, of course, I know nothing about baseball or anything of that nature. I wouldn't trust my just opinion on any of it. But we really dug deep into the sabermetrics. We really dug deep into the data behind it. And we provided some pretty interesting winning algorithms as we migrated through there. So fast forward to today, I am now the Chief Revenue Officer here at Furniture. And so we are ranked the fastest growing furniture retailer in the United States. And we have nothing but high hopes as we kind of migrate forward. We're charged with growing it by about $100 million a year over the next 5 years. And we got a lot of growth and aspiration there. So that's the quick down and dirty. I hope I didn't take too much time.
That was perfect. No, honestly, that might have been the best over because there's so much in there and I can't wait to dive into it. But fantastic job. I want to go back to a really key point because I talk about this all the time. We talk about this at On the Ball Ventures all the time. Growing pains are a good thing. When you're a kid, you get those aches in your knees, you get those aches in your hips. You're growing, you're getting bigger. And even though it hurts, it's a good thing. At some point in our lives, we decide that growing pains are no longer a good thing. And we actually run away from that. So how did you know as a young kid that you should turn down an opportunity possibly of a lifetime? Some people would look at that and go, oh my God, you would have been set forever. You could have sat in a cushy chair and made decisions inside of a corporate organization and had the golden handcuffs, as some people say. How did you know that risk was important to you and that you needed to do that in order to fulfill your own potential?
Good question. So my mom said this line to me a while ago, and I've held on to it way more than I think she intended me to hold on to it. But it really, to my core, is a philosophical belief. And she had recently got a new condo down here in South Florida and moving in, all that kind of stuff. And as her and my dad were planning how to, it's hard to find the right colors for paint. It's hard to get the right flooring. It's hard to do all this. And when you're completely renovating and building the whole thing, it's a tough decisions to make. And, most oftentimes couples can get in large fights about any decision going on. And one day my mom just had the people paint, and without any decision, without putting 6 different ones on there, it was just painted. And I was like, what if you don't like this, Mom? And her response was, we can always paint it again. And that was kind of remarkably humbling to me, but also taught me a really invaluable lesson on the idea that no decision you make is really that weighted, And I think oftentimes we find ourselves faced with key decisions, unbelievably crippling, have to make the right call decisions. And we feel powerless and almost like you have to make this call correctly when you often can just paint it again. And I think that's a big, big lesson that I've learned is that in reflection, some of the decisions I've made have defined me. But candidly, it would have happened. Things sort of progress as they go. So in making the decision, as your question was asked around what empowered me to take that risk, is knowing that far too often we land on our feet.
Sure.
And you can always kind of make that call and trust yourself,
Honestly, we could probably stop the show right now and just say, hey, everybody listening, you can paint it again. Take that and apply that to your life and let's go on. Because that's awesome. I think, you hear all of the terms or the sayings of paralysis of analysis and the fear of failure, but that's a real thing. I think people instead of just saying, screw it, whatever happens, we'll figure it out at the other side of it. But if I don't just say yes to it right now, I don't know what will happen. Or if I don't just say no to it right now, I don't know what will happen. And they get stuck in this decision of indecision, which essentially defines their life for them. That's amazing. That's so, shout out to your mom for that one, because we can paint it again. I'm carrying that for a long time.
She's a smart lady.
Another really, I think, important thing, because tough conversations are hard, and just letting somebody down is hard. Never mind the fact if it's their livelihood and you're completely altering that person's trajectory of life. So how did you have those conversations when you had to let people know that, hey, this didn't go how we thought it would? We failed here. Like, this is our first failure. It's not fatal, but this is over. Like, what we're doing right now, this is a problem, and there's nothing we can really do about this. How did you go about having that conversation?
I operate with like total transparency in pretty much everything I do. And so one of the big things we practiced in Stanford and in pretty much any startup we've run is a ultra level of transparency and daily communications. And so the conversation wasn't all of a sudden everyone's driving around in the car and feeling like we're going 80 and we're perfectly fine. It was a gradual decline, like, oh, the bumper fell off. And so the initial conversation with each person saying, hey, listen, this is what we have to do, was honestly just the right one, and you feel good about the fact that you're saying, hey, listen, I got 3 months run rate left. I got 3 months of salary I can pay you left. But I'm choosing to have you still get paid and go find the next opportunity, because I owed it to those that gave years and years of their lives to me to be able to do that thing. The hard part and the really, really tough thing to face is the internal conversation, and it's the recognition that these, especially when you're building something from the ground up, especially when you're having something as aspirational as what we were trying to build was, and facing the fact that your own mortality, right? Even our gods have clay feet, right? And so when you start to recognize that, wow, I really screwed the pooch on this one, I was 25 and had a $3 million company and just didn't really know what I was doing, and I think that I learned a lot from that, but that's the humbling kind of whoa, you really messed up, and you had to learn a lot from that one.
So, probably one of the biggest lessons that you learned was the ability to have that conversation with yourself, and be able to take ownership of, all right, I screwed this up. It happens, and I love the fact that you didn't blindside anybody with it, right? So it made it that much easier. Talk to us about some of those lessons that you learned from failing hard on that one, and how that helped carry you to the next success, and how you overcame that. Look, a lot of people would fold up shop and go, all right, I'm just going to go back into the corporate world. I'm going to find a job and no more risk for me. This isn't for me anymore. I don't have a stomach for it. How did you get over that ill feeling of, shit, I fucked this up, and I own this. I got to get back on the horse. How did you get back on the horse? What were the lessons that you carried with you, and then how did it turn into success?
I wish I could say at the time, I knew, I wish I could say at the time I knew. I'm going to, as with anything, you set a plan, you hit the plan. I think it was Charles Schwab who had an assistant come to him saying, hey, listen, I will get a $5,000 bonus from you if I could tell you the 2 key steps to make a business happen. And that's just the guarantee. And he's like, okay, sounds good. What is it? He writes it in an envelope and it says, set daily goals, achieve them, and there really is a pretty obvious mentality. And so in hindsight, I wish I knew that foresight to say, yeah, no, I was just keeping on pushing. And that's what you have to do. No doubt, you're backed into a corner. You have your parents or your loved ones or whomever looking and worried about you, I in the early stages of some of my startups, I'm making nothing. I'm making literally $0. And my parents are trying to write me a check that I'm ripping up. I'm I'm not doing that. I have to see this thing through. But when you face that level of candid failure, you just, I think 2 things happened. That first one, that was hard. And that was a really big gut check that you really took a shot anyone listening on this call is thinking through the ideas of like, what do I want to do next? Like, what type of innovation, like what adversity am I facing, and how do I like go about that? And when you do it, when you set out to do something, like when you set out to train for the half marathon and stop, it's hard to face anyone who you told you were doing that. It's hard to face those conversations, and that's never going to go away. That's never going to go away, that feeling, because like it's in you. It's to your core. You want to deliver on it. But the thing that I will say, and the biggest learning I had from it is, again, it's around you have a way to like land on your feet. And like that seems to happen every time. And so should I start another stand for? Should I start another company? Should I start going down those paths ever again? And should you consider those kind of things listening to this call? It's if it fails, when it fails, any of those kind of things, you'll be okay, and you'll start the next one. And I think that's the biggest opportunity towards grabbing the bull by the horn and running. Is just, it's impossible to believe, but those who have failed miserably, like I have, will attest you're okay, and you get through it. And I think you can always, like, again, back to, you can always paint it again, and you can always try again. You can always go down that path. So I think it's an important part.
Did that big one soften you to failure a little bit? Like, all right, it's not as bad as it, I'm over it. I got over it. So did that make it easier to take risk again? Did that make it, as you're in a company now with major goals in front of you, is the fear of failure less now? Is it like, okay, we might fail, but I'm okay with that if it happens? Or is it still that, hey, I don't want it to happen, I'm afraid of it happening? Like, how has your perspective changed from starting your first company, failing at it, to now having successes? How do you look at failure?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that answer. The first is, yes, absolutely. I'm way okay with failure now. Almost expected. Is that like, as you start down paths, whether it's companies or like just taking on a new hobby or anything else like that, I honestly treat it as like, I should be failing. I should be pushing myself out there. And I think the key time to change a habit, the key time to change something that's going on, is when you're at the top, like is when when you feel comfortable. And if I am not failing, I'm feeling that I'm not doing enough. And so to that second end question, especially as you relate that to something different than startups. So you take it into the corporate world and you say, hey, listen, like we have a little bit more piggy bank at our disposal. We have a little bit more that we can work through and like go down this path. What is that rate of failure? What is that like pace that we should be looking for? And in my mind as a leader, where I like to come from with it is, I think that our team should be failing about 30% of the time. And like, that's where I would like to see. And if we are failing less than that, we are not pushing ourselves far enough, And I think that's a really key aspect of this, is that like, if we're innovating and we're not seeing failures, we're not innovating. We're not like operationally growing. And so like, you have to see it and you have to welcome it and you have to celebrate it. And because if you're looking for that innovative culture is really just a series of small 1% improvements with a lot of failures in between, right?
Sure.
And if you're looking for that type of innovation, you have to empower the entire team to fail and allow them to, and almost celebrate. It's like, good, we're moving in the right direction. We're taking that next step. And it's like, that one didn't work. Cool. What'd you learn? What'd you learn?
Well, and so that's a really interesting point, because I think most people don't equate 1% growth to failing. But that's exactly what's happening. As soon as you fail one time, you learn what didn't work. You can apply some new method. You can take the lesson learned from that, and that then creates the growth. So I think most people go, oh, well, if I'm growing, that means things are going well and I'm succeeding. It's actually the opposite. If you're really growing, you want to be failing 30% of the time, because that's really pushing the growth of learning new things and getting you out of your comfort zone. That's really awesome. I think this is a really interesting scenario, and I know this because I'm working with you guys, but I would like to hear your take on this. You have an entrepreneurial mindset. You are an entrepreneur. You've been brought into the corporate world. Your appetite for risk, your ability to fail and continue is far different than most people's who are in the corporate world. A lot of them don't really have an entrepreneurial spirit because that's why they're there. They like the comfort of the salary. They like knowing that they're involved in a company that's going to take care of them, and that's what they believe and all of that. So how do you lead as an entrepreneur in a world full of people that might not share the same ideals that you do?
Good questions. I think at our core, every individual seeks purpose. Humans seek purpose, right? And I think we always find that interesting balance where I think the first thing, like if you just like forget the business hat, like just to your core as a human, like the first thing you need is security. You need to be able to know you got food, shelter, water, love of someone going down those things. So you really need that like total consistency in that. And then the awkwardly and contradictorily, the next thing you need is inconsistency. You need random variable change. Like you need that often. And I think that is to our core with everyone. So I think everyone enjoys the idea of like the security aspect going in. And then everyone also likes to innovate, change, and create purpose. And so I think that it is wherever you're doing that, in a company of 3 with like no revenue for 2 years, or in a company of 2,000 and growing at $100 million a year, it's still the same core human principles. And those principles are, hey, listen, I have a short time on this earth. I have a very short time on this earth. I'm only going to see 70 more summers, you know? And when you translate it that way, it's like, okay, like where are you going? Like, what are you doing this summer? Where do you want to take things? And I think when you take that kind of like idea mindset to it, it is important to remember that like life is short and like we just need to take chances, you know?
So for those of you who haven't drawn the conclusion already, Andy is very analytical. He comes from an analytics background. He has been a part of so many different analytics roles. He analyzes his life just the way he analyzes his business. So that little stat there about only having 70 summers left and what am I going to do with them, that is exactly the way he goes about his life, which is part of the reason I enjoy spending time with him, because it leads to unbelievable conversations about how we can continue to grow together. But with that being said, your background of where you come from, very analytics driven, you know, even in social media marketing, that's an analytics play. You're watching engagement, you're watching numbers for the first time maybe in your career, aside from, you know, having to raise money, you're overseeing an entire sales operation, which has far more human behavior involved than just analytics. How has your analytics background really prepared you and helped you in this role of managing a sales organization and managing an entire group of salespeople to help them understand how analytics can help them grow, but also helped you understand the human side of things?
Cool. Yeah. So there's, again, 2 answers. So the first part is around the fact that like data visualization is very important, you know, and I candidly believe the key to success is around people, process, and like doing the right priorities, right? And so you got to have the right people in place. You have to have like the people you can trust and rely on going down. They have to have the right processes. And the way I like to look at it is like we need to eliminate speed bumps on the highway, right? The faster we can move, the like going down there. But priorities is the thing that most organizations miss. You know, most organizations say like there's 1,000 ways to boil the ocean. I don't really know where to begin. Right. And it gets pretty daunting when you try to boil that ocean, and especially if you're in the wrong spot. Right. And so data helps that a lot, is that like what you could be focusing on, you can get really good at X, but really Y is the thing hurting your business going through. And so what we focus on is that like we have these very particular KPIs around what we call EMDS, which is Enterprise Management Development System. And in it, the whole idea is from 10 feet away in 10 seconds, anyone can look at your KPIs and understand where you should be focused, right? And so that's a very impactful opportunity. And so the way to do that is you need to break it down. So you need to say, what are my main KPIs, the most important things that need to go on? And then underneath that, what are my sub KPIs that are important towards helping that? I think Google has OKRs. There's 1,000 different companies doing it in different ways, but in the translational element of it, just define what would make you successful, find a way to track, and then measure that every day and visualize it so that anyone here can help. So when you're asking, how do I assist others in looking at data and going down those paths, it is through data visualization. It's through putting it literally on a wall. It's putting it like technologically right there for anyone to be able to see and making it dead simple for those things. Now, that said, organizations aren't strictly driven by data. And so to answer in the second part of yours, there is a remarkable amount of, like Toyota calls it Gemba walk, and really Gemba just stands for go and see, right? And so a lot of it is almost the fact that you have to take data completely out, right? And so like hypocritical, sure, and like has some little irony there, but nonetheless, what it really like requires, and I think one of the big points is that like we're almost stripping out data half the time and say, I don't care what the number says. What do your eyes see? Like, what do you see? Do you see us improving in this category or not? Because a lot of the time, your project can be stalled by the fact that the data isn't accurate. The tracking is not perfect. These are these reasons. And oftentimes in projects that you're trying to progress, you're saying, hey, listen, I can't continue until I have accurate data. And my argument would be is you can look with your eyes and you can say, I think it's improving. Let's keep going down that path until you trust the data.
I think that's the perfect tie between understanding the criticalness of people, process, priorities aligned with data. Like, as long as you have the right people in there, if the data's fucked up, the people can look at it and say, this data can't be right because what I'm seeing doesn't align with that data. But if you have the wrong people in there, the data could be right. The people could be in there going, there's no way that data is right because they don't even know what to be looking at. So I think I understand at least how those marry together perfectly. I would say they're not hypocritical. I say that's where you find the absolute perfect point of, effectiveness and efficiency and everything, just finding that optimal point of, marginal cost or marginal benefit, however you want to talk about it in an economics term. That's it. When you get the right people in place with the right processes, with the right priorities, and you have all the data that's supporting all of those things happening, that's it. Forget it. Take your hands off the wheel and let it go and get out of the way, because all you can do from there is screw it up.
Absolutely.
Well, I know that you're a busy man. I know that you lead with your calendar just the way that we do. So I want to be respectful of your time. I really, really appreciate you jumping on this episode with me. This thing is chock full of nuggets, and I'm excited to share it with our community when it drops. So thank you, Andy, for being a part of the conversation. I appreciate your friendship and your business, and I look forward to continuing on with you for a long time.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope to be back on again soon. See you.
Thank you.